Aloha from Maui, and welcome to A Course in Miracles Workbook for Students, Lesson 13. Yesterday, we did I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. Today, we're looking at a meaningless world engenders fear. I kind of like to go back and read a little bit from yesterday, actually the day before, and see where it says my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. And just kind of read this again. It says, this is the first idea we have had that is related to a major phase of the correction process, the reversal of the thinking of the world. It seems as if the world determines what you perceive. Today's idea introduces the concepts that your thoughts determine the world that you see. So we're on this idea that our thoughts are determining the world we see. And so lesson 12 said, I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. And in previous lessons, we reminded ourselves or suggested to ourselves that our thoughts, like the things around us, don't really have any meaning. They're just only meaning they have to us is the meaning that we assign to them. And basically, we've been told that we're not really thinking at all when we're thinking like this. So our meaningless thoughts are not really God's thoughts. So we're seeing only the past because our mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. Now today, we're looking at the idea that a meaningless world engenders fear. Today's idea is really another form of the preceding one, except that it is more specific as to the emotion aroused. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible. Nothing without meaning exists. And I remember thinking, when we were doing some of the earlier exercises about I'm seeing a meaningless world, my thoughts are meaningless. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world, and I was trying to wrap my head around that thought of meaninglessness, which is often synonyms for that are like valueless or worthless, or they don't really they're not important, or they're insignificant, meaningless. And I would go, what? This doesn't make sense to my logical mind. I mean, they are meaning, but the thing is, my logical mind has assigned them to meanings. And so to say that it's meaningless doesn't make sense to a mind that's assigned meaning to everything. But I remember thinking, how could it be possible that everything is meaningless? Like when I see a beautiful tree, or hear the birds singing, or see a awesome waterfall, or seeing the calm, quiet, in the now moment of a surfer riding a wave. How could that be meaningless? And here we're told actually a meaningless world is impossible. Nothing without meaning exists. The thing is, though, is it the meaning? Is it its true meaning? Or am I only just seeing the meaning that I'm assigned to it? And I think that's kind of where we're headed. We're like letting go of the meaning that we've assigned to things so that a different meaning can be written upon them. And so it says, Nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not think you perceive something that has no meaning. So nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not think you perceive something that has no meaning. So a lot of the things that I think I perceive have no meaning, but I still perceive them as if they were real and valid and meaningful. But on the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think you do perceive it. So these things that I look around and I have assigned meaning to, I really do think that I perceive them. And there's a phrase that people in the Ernest Holmes Science of Mind, Spiritual Centers for Living say that Jesus is one of the main things that Jesus taught was that it's done unto you according to your belief. And this is basically the same idea. Whatever we believe in, we project, and then we see it, and we believe in it because our thoughts projected it and created it. So we do believe it's real. It's real to us. And so the Course says, on the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think you do perceive this, whatever it is that's coming from your meaningless thoughts. So recognition of meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety in the separated ones. And the separated ones are just all those, which is practically everybody, that believes that we are separate individuals in separate bodies, living separate lives, thinking separate thoughts. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning is to be written in the empty space that meaninglessness provides. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. And on this alone, it is correct. It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaninglessness and accept it without fear. It's essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaninglessness and then accept it without fear. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. And I believe that's why when the Course is giving us exercises to do, if they become uncomfortable, that means they're becoming fearful. And the Course is not to increase fear in us, but it's to do the very opposite, to decrease fear in us. So that's why the Course will sometimes say, well, if you can continue without fear or uncomfortable and do these lessons 4 or 5 times instead of 3, go ahead and do them. But if you're feeling a little uncomfortable that this new idea has been being taught to you and planted in your mind, so to speak, then don't, if it's making you afraid, and don't continue to force yourself to experience that fear, but just do it the recommended times, once or twice or 3 times or whatever, and we'll take it slow. God's got all the patience in the world. We're like eternal creatures, so we'll eventually get it. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with the images that do not exist. And so if we're fearful, we don't want to induce that kind of fearfulness in us, because we're only going to increase the illusions that we see. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you who equate yourself with the ego. And if you think of yourself as a body, you definitely equate yourself with the ego. And most of us do. I mean, don't feel bad about it. It's just the way things are. We grow up developing this self-made ideal of ourselves, and the whole of the world teaches us to do that. And so it's not a thing to be afraid of. And we'll learn later that it doesn't even truly exist, but we've identified with it. Like if you were an actor in a movie script or a play, or you were an avatar in a video game, imagine that you so lost yourself in that character that you were playing that you forgot who you really were. And that's kind of how we've done with the ego. The ego is like the character that's been created. Actually, we've created it in our own mind, and we have so identified it with it that we have forgotten our true self. And that's what A Course in Miracles is about. It's about remembering our true self. The exercises for today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times for not much more than a minute, or so as at most each time, are to be practiced in a somewhat different way from the preceding ones. With eyes closed, repeat today's idea to yourself, then open your eyes and look about you, slowly saying, I am looking at a meaningless world. Repeat this statement to yourself as you look about, then close your eyes and conclude with, a meaningless world engenders fear, because I think I am in competition with God. Wow. You may find it difficult to avoid resistance in one form or another to this concluding statement. You might be thinking, what? I'm not in competition with God. There's no way. But whatever form such resistance may take, remind yourself that you are really afraid of such a thought because of the vengeance of the enemy. You are not expected to believe this statement at this point, and will probably dismiss it as preposterous, and that's okay. Note carefully, however, any signs of overt or covert fear which it may arouse. This is our first attempt at stating an explicit cause and effect relationship of a kind which you are very inexperienced in recognizing. Do not dwell in the concluding statement, and try not even to think of it except during the practice periods. That will suffice at present. So anyway, that's our lesson for today. And send out love and aloha to you, and I'll see you tomorrow.